for those people that have attended, I know that they would have got a lot out of it. But I'll tell you what, I think there's quite a lot they're going to get out of our session today.
Yeah, I hope so.
I might kick off. Look, what I'm going to do is we've got a lot of friendly faces and we've got a lot of people that have joined this Zoom call that have been part of multiple sessions, both today and yesterday. So firstly, I just wanted to say thank you for those people that have supported Broker Illuminati. For those, I have referenced it before, an Illuminati refers to a secret society. It's kind of the opposite of what I'm trying to do with these sessions. It's really about making sure more brokers and more people within our industry are aware of some of the things that I think that I personally think that have been of value. To introduce you Craig, obviously there's a lot of people that know a person with a last name Slattery that happen to work for Slattery's, and you don't have that. The reason why I'd much prefer having to hear from yourself, other than being a good shy boy and we get along for a drink and a game of football, is the fact that it's very helpful having a relationship with a valuer as a broker. For those people that do property, it's not like you have a relationship with the person who does the valuation for someone's house. However, when it comes to equipment finance, the fact is that there is some lenders that allow you to work with a valuer. And why that can become important? Well, I think the best example of that with young Craig here would be a particular time. What happens if you've got a client who happens to be buying a business from his business partners and the others can't find out? Well, that's a valuation that has to happen in the wee hours of the morning, many hours from home, doesn't it, Craig?
Mate, it certainly does. Certainly does.
So Craig did a valuation for me at 5 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, around about an hour and a half from where he lives. And that's the sort of service and feedback that I'm very lucky to have with working with Craig, which is why I think even though we don't have a large group on this call, I think you will find it quite a privilege to hear the unfiltered feedback from Craig about a bunch of different aspects in what we look at. I think there'll be some surprise in there. So with that massive introduction, mate, welcome. Mate, I wanted to touch just very quickly before we forget about it. This morning's sessions were around structuring and tax debt, and I was speaking to a few liquidators. Now, you'd be aware that there's no one playing a violin for all of the liquidators that haven't had a lot of work over the last 9 months. But the flip side is we keep hearing about a bunch of businesses that are in trouble. And from our sessions this morning, the expectation is that in January, things are going to change in terms of government assistance. I would imagine that you mustn't have had a lot of work on in the last 6 months.
Yeah, look, thanks for that. That's a really nice introduction, Chris. It is appreciated. And as Chris mentioned, my name's Craig Russell and I'm from Slattery Asset Advisory. And I do a lot of work with Chris. We do a lot with the insolvency and on the banking side of it. In what was just Chris was just talking about, what we're finding is that the insolvency side of business at the moment is very quiet. So there's a lot that's going to happen, but at the moment it is very quiet. I find it if someone's telling you insolvency is flat out, I sort of question where they're coming from, because it's not. It is pretty quiet. There is some small rats and mice jobs around, but there's nothing really in that space. In saying that, we do a lot of work with the banks. So, and it doesn't matter if it, we do a lot with CBA, Westpac, ScotPac, the whole lot, all of the major banks. For us to do their work, we have to be on the panel. So you need to be on one of the bank panels, and we're on all of them. The banks and everybody is saying that through your JobKeeper and JobSeeker, that's going to be extended through to March. Nothing is really going to happen until March. So that's next year. I don't think it's going to happen before then.
That's some interesting feedback, though, because the sessions that we had this morning, everyone seems to think that, okay, things are going to change in January. But what you say makes sense in that a lot of the clients who, if someone wants to pull the trigger on a client, really, there isn't going to be a lot that happens over December and January.
No, and what you're saying is correct. So with the banks, as you guys would all be aware, they sort of shut down mid-December to mid-January. So they're not allowed to send out any of their notices. So the banks are going to be pretty quiet between now and the end of January before they can do anything. Then that's going to flow into March because they're going to have to hold off, and they're not just going to go, okay, we can send our notices out, bang, here you go. So the way things are structured at the moment, the banks aren't really going to act on anything, and they're telling me probably till March. And insolvency guys are saying exactly the same, and that's going from your Rogers Reedy, your Hawke Chadwicks, SV Partners, all of these major guys that are all saying the same. It's really going to be quiet until we think March. I think January, February, you might get a trickle, but that's when they're all thinking it's going to happen when that March period turns around and the job seeker, the JobKeeper period's finished. They're also saying at the moment, the business that are hanging on, a lot of them are just kicking the can along and they're waiting. And the smart ones, what they're doing is what we're finding is that they're selling off their assets. So that when it comes to the period of March where a liquidator or an administrator has been appointed, they're really going to have hardly any assets left because they've sold it all, because they can forecast, they can see what's happening. Again, and we don't think anything's going to happen until March.
I think the other interesting thing, Craig, and I think I read about it in one of your recent reports, is that there seems to be a bit of well, I've certainly seen it in my own business. There is a rush to a lot of the, I want to say quality vehicles, but I'll be accused of being a Toyota fan. It seems like there's more Land Cruisers and Hiluxes that people are paying ridiculous amounts of top dollar for, that if I'm a lender and I look back on my pieces of paper that tell me what I think something's worth, some of these Land Cruisers and in particular Hiluxes, I mean, speaking from a personal example just recently, I had a young guy wanting his first car, was not going to compromise on his business ute. He was going to get a nice ute, and a 2016 SR, not an SR5, with nearly 100,000 Ks, sold for $40,000. And that car brand new was barely 50.
Yeah, and you're 100% right. And if people want, I can add, you can forward through that our latest quarterly report that I sent through to you. But what we're finding, and I brought this in with me. So obviously the best sellers at the moment are the Ford Ranger, which is up 19.6%. Then there's the Toyota Hilux, the RAV4, the Hyundai, and it goes down. And in
to your point though, like you say they're the best sellers, but would the next question, in what you're seeing, have you seen the stock? Like I'm not seeing a lot of dealerships with a lot of stock to sell.
No, and that's why the auction side of our business, the motor transport, is doing exceptionally well. Because there's just not the amount of stock around that there was. Obviously, the insolvency has got a lot to do with it, because when companies go under, there's all the vehicles. So at the moment, stock is hard to get. A good stock is still hard to get, and that's why at the moment it's all going through the roof. Now, I'll give you an example, and I have them here. These are our recent solds in the last couple of months. So we had, for example, a 2008 Holden SS Ute, and it only had 36,000 kilometres on it, but it was a 2008. That sold for nearly $23,000. So that's actually
12 years old.
120% of retail. Going through that, you've got Land Cruisers that they sold for 110% of retail. Everything that I have here, all my notes, everything that we have done is way above retail. Everything's 100% above, but these are older vehicles as well. But they're just, sorry, before you jump in. So you've got, for example, a Mitsubishi Triton GXL 4x4. Like that sold for 25,000, which is 100% of retail.
When you say, just to clarify, to keep it simple, we say percentage of retail. Yeah, you're talking about what the current retail value, because the retail value is obviously determined by dealerships and sales.
Correct.
So, but I mean, I think it's all probably a bigger number to simply look at what that car was worth brand new. I mean,
absolutely. You go back and have a, yeah, you're right. Have a look at what they're brand new, compared to what you're getting for them now. Mate, they're still just holding their prices. But there's, again, it goes back to there's supply and demand. There's not a lot of around. Anything that's good, mate, they're getting snaffled up. And what's keeping the price up is the end user is buying the vehicle, as opposed to the dealer jumping in, buying it, and then putting another 10% or 20% or whatever they feel they should put on top of it. So I think that the transport, only because there's not a great lot of stock around, is exceptionally well on the auction side of it.
Right. And I know that you guys had a feature just recently on transport more broadly. What have you seen yourselves in terms of your larger trucks and your tippers and trailers?
Okay, on your larger ones, and again, I brought a heap of this in with me. So
yeah, I wanted to keep it hot, yeah. And for those that join us, while Craig's looking at that, I really, we have a small group. Please take advantage if there's any questions whatsoever. And I know a few of you used to running webinars and wanting people to ask some questions. I'd love for you to do the same, hint and nudge. If you've got any questions for Craig, love to hear them. Use the chat function and happy to cover off on, because really the whole reason we're spending time out of our day-to-day is so we can take something back to our day-to-day, so we can learn and pick up on. So please shoot us a question if there's something that's of your mind.
I feel that was slightly directed at me, Chris. Craig, I do have a quick question just in relation to some of these going above retail value, and the impact that you're seeing on people's ability to purchase that if you've got lenders that are having LVR caps.
Yep. Look, again, it comes down to the supply and demand. If people, we'll have a look at them and have a look at what they're worth, and then we have a lot of sales data, obviously, that
of course. So they're seeing it reflected across, like, that it's a fair and reasonable price to be paying for that vehicle at the moment, regardless of whether they're doing a standard retail value of it.
Yeah. Well, that's right. It's if we go across it, and sometimes you need to look at the asset, because it'll come across. You don't get to see, if you're doing online, you're not going to get to see. A photo can hide 1,000 sins.
Yeah, right? Sure.
And that's a problem. People buy them, and don't get me wrong, we do sell a lot online, but a lot of I'm recommending that you need to go and site the asset, have a look at it, and then we can ascertain if you're paying the right money. Because some people, some people, their expectations are out of this world, to say. So that's where we can pull it back and go, well, actually, it's not worth, for an example, it's not worth 70 grand. It's worth, we do this a lot. And they go, well, someone wants to borrow $70,000. I've got this truck, this trailer, whatever it may be. Then we'll go in and have a look at it and go, well, actually, you know what? It's probably worth about 50 grand.
Right. So I think we're having some of those problems when you see, when Victoria's been in lockdown, for example, so people weren't able to go to a dealership and site the car. So I think that, that's obviously had a flow-on impact, from a business point of view, and our brokers being able to secure some loans for a few clients. But when you're saying that, dealerships aren't so much buying them, and therefore that's pushing up the price, I think, do you anticipate that we're going to see a little bit of a reshift in this current potentially overvaluation of these vehicles now that you've got the Victorian market reopened?
Yeah, 100%.
Right.
I think it's definitely going to change. And we're seeing it. I mean, now we have an office down in Victoria, and our guys, yes, we've had government exemptions to go around to certain jobs, because it's what had to be done.
Sure.
But they've been working from home. So once it opens up and our guys can get back out and start moving around and doing more valuations not on the bigger gear, but on smaller. So we're talking motor vehicles and trucks and trailers, about one-off assets. It's going to pick up, because again, there is as you know, this is the move to buying it online. But a lot of these guys, they're still old school and they still want to go and have a look and kick the tires and have a look at it. I'm probably one of those guys. If I'm going to spend 100 grand on a truck, I probably want to go and have a look at it.
I'd be doing the same.
Yeah, there you go. And now they've opened up. You're going to get people that are going to go, okay, I can go to the car yard, I can have a look, and I can kick the tires. It's all that touchy feel thing, you know. So.
It's really interesting, Hannah, and thank you for the question. Really appreciate it. I want to build on Hannah's question to a point there, Craig, because that's an interesting one. I get my valuation from Slattery's or anyone else, and let's say I've got my 2016 Hilux or whatnot. How quickly are you adjusting your auction value of a report based on the new data? How quickly do you incorporate the new numbers? Because obviously from one perspective, hey, I'm a broker and I want to lend against an asset. Awesome. Love these secondhand asset prices pumping up. Beautiful. But on the flip side, of course, you may well find that there's differences in stock and I've already got clients that are jumping on board, getting to WA and trying to get assets through. And I would imagine Victoria will be no different.
Oh, absolutely. It's all going to be.
So how quickly do you guys sort of shape your data for your reporting in terms of auction values, given how, I suppose, given the volatility in the plant equipment market?
Look, we can only go off the research that we have, and ours is it's updated weekly, basically. So we can get, there's places that we can get into, and we can have a look what an asset has sold for anywhere in Australia, and we can do it overseas, but we mainly keep it to the local market. Anywhere in Australia, and it can tell me who sold it, what the date it was sold. So I can go in there and put the date, everything I want to know, who sold it, how much it sold for, all the information that I can have there. And it could have been sold last month or this month. I think going forward, that's the only data that we have to go off. At the moment, they're holding strong. I do think it will turn around. I do think it'll go around and back to the way everything's going to have a shift. And I think the prices will, because I think there's going to be, once it opens up through the COVID, everyone's going to be out there again, like we just spoke about, going around, be able to kick the tires and have a look at it. And I do think the prices will come back.
Maybe it's just a little bit of jealousy. Maybe it's a bit of hatred. Maybe it's the fact that State of Origin's on tomorrow. But we have a Queenslander on this call as well who Hannah took the bait, and thank you, Hannah, for your question. There's a Queenslander on this phone call, and I don't want to single them out at all. But what I'm kind of hoping is, if I live in Queensland or Western Australia or these other states, have their valuations on plant and equipment changed because there's been a lack of ability for people to buy into state? Have they contracted, or have they been fairly much business as usual because they haven't been affected so much by COVID?
Look, it has been affected, and the prices have dropped a bit over there, only because they can only sell into the local market, so they can't go to the East Coast to the West Coast and vice versa. There was a period prior to this where there was a heap of trucks, and the people from over in the West would come over, buy them, take it back, and we were doing the same. There was a lot of and transport. Since that stopped, you sort of restricted, and the market has fallen a bit over there as well. But I think once they open up, and the same with Queensland, once it opens up and everything's, I think it'll even itself out, and it'll all go back to nearly to what it was.
Because I've got you on the call and I know you well enough, we've had a few beers, and I know you like an American muscle car, to say the least.
I do.
Have you found many people selling their toys during COVID and having those valued?
Not really. I had a conversation with the managing director, or the CEO of Australian Muscle Cars. He told me that because we've got a Mustang in here at the moment. Now his words to me were that the American muscle car in Australia has dropped off. It's out of favour at the moment. So the muscle cars that people want to buy are Australian. They're not so much into the American muscle car. I think that'll turn around, but at the moment they're just not as popular as what they were.
which is funny when you flip over and you see how many people are buying a Ram right now.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But when I'm talking muscle cars, that okay, you got the bigger ones, but that's probably not really a muscle car. You have a look. I mean, you got your Mustangs, the Corvettes. You know, they're just. I mean, but that's a newer car, and I'm not sort of going to go. I just don't think the Mustang is what I would call the muscle car at the moment. It's yeah, you can buy them everywhere now.
In terms of it's a good thing. There's a person from our previous session who I financed a Mustang for, and I'm glad they're not on the call. They might have taken offence.
I'm sure that's right. But when you talk, I'm talking big muscle cars. What I call, I mean, everyone that you drive down the road, there's every fifth person's driving a Mustang. You know, and a muscle car is not something that you can get a Mustang in a 4-cylinder.
Now, one thing that people aren't driving around at the moment so much is your planes and helicopters. How have you seen that space in terms of aviation and that sort of gear?
Mate, again, everything's slowed down at the moment. The aviation space is no different.
So the values held up, but the sales have gone down simply because people haven't been forced to sell yet.
Well, they haven't even been getting them valued. They're just mothballing them and holding them. And again, they're just getting them run. You've got to keep them running because obviously your fixed wing and your rotary is the same. They've got to be in the air. They've got to be flying. But at the moment, they're just keeping them maintained. And, you know, if you go down to Bankstown Airport, they're picking up now, but they're still, we haven't involved in many aircraft valuations lately because people aren't getting them. And obviously people aren't going out and buying choppers and fixed wing at the moment. So that space, we believe it's quieting down a lot.
Okay. And I suppose I asked you this last year, but I'm going to ask you it again. Last year you cheated and you just talked about American muscle cars, and you've already had your 5 minutes of fame on American muscle cars, mate. What's the weirdest thing you've ever had to value and why?
The weirdest thing we've ever had to value. And
I can't really say. Don't leave that out. Come on. And why?
Oh, gee. Weirdest thing. Oh, mate, I wouldn't even like to guess the weirdest thing. Sex toy shop.
Oh, really? So you had to value the stock?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, value the stock. That would be probably the weirdest one I've ever had to do.
Okay. In terms of to keep it PG, mate, I can't believe you've taken us there.
You asked me, I will be able to say that.
No. But my just, I suppose, from your perspective, this isn't your first rodeo. You've been doing valuations for, is it nearly 30 years?
Yep, it's about nearly 30 years, yep.
30 years. What's been the most surprising thing for you in terms of valuations through COVID versus other sort of, obviously there's been GFC, there's tech wreck, there's all if you do the stats, nearly every 7 to 8 years, there's been a downturn in the market and there would be different changes. What's someone in a session this morning talked about COVID as a black swan event in terms of numbers, once, you know, it hasn't been seen. Whenever I hear things like new normal and black swan, I'm always skeptical. I still remember when Ipswich had a 1 in 100 year flood, and the very next year it had a 1 in 100 year flood. So from me, I'd prefer to hear experience on the ground. You've done this for nearly 30 years. What are some of the trends and things that you've been most surprised about?
Look, I think what you've just said, you know, the 100-year flood, it's really nothing like that. You know, every year they go, oh, because of the fires. Mate, we're coming into summer, we're going to have fires again. And that's going to affect areas. Floods, it's going to affect, it happens. I mean, yes, COVID's never happened before, and it is hopefully once in a lifetime thing that's going to happen. But there's other things that, you know, your floods and your fires, your droughts, which affects all your agri and everything. There's all these things that still still go on. We still keep ticking away. The world keeps turning. What I've noticed this time around is there's a lot more people prepared to buy second-hand vehicles. So I'm talking your trucks and trailers, not so much on your car side of it, but your trucks and trailers. The second-hand market for older gear has increased. And I think that, again, that has a lot to do with a lot of our, as you know, we import a lot of our gear. So obviously it takes a lot longer to get gear here. So people are prepared to go out and buy an older unit that they can put to work straight away. But apart from that, that's probably the only difference. I don't think everything's going to come back to normal. We're still going to have the fires. We're still going to have floods. We're still going to have all these things that are obstacles in our way. So I don't know if it's a black spot where we're all going to fall into it and that's going to be the end of the world. But yeah, it has had a downturn. People have lost their jobs. Businesses have closed. But you know, I believe for every business that's closed, there's new businesses are going to pop up to take their place. Going through it. I was speaking to a guy, one of our guys in Melbourne yesterday, who's telling me on the hospitality side of it, now that Melbourne's starting to open up, there's a massive demand for catering equipment, and people are spending big dollars, which is totally different to what we thought there was going to be. I thought it was going to be the opposite. Yeah, correct. So, you know, I just think things will go back to normal. And I'm not going to say the new normal, but things will get back pretty close to where we were. You know, I'd say by maybe March, April next year. Once this is all settled down, I don't think it's not the end of the world.
Really appreciate your perspective, Craig, as always. Look forward to having a drink in a NFL game with you at some stage in the near future. Right. In the absence of any other questions, I just want to thank those that joined us today. Obviously, session, there's a few people that have caught our session about how debtor finance will help you write more asset finance. That will be on this afternoon with 3 lenders live and discussing aspects of that, which will be great. And the session that probably everyone is slept on is regarding the experience of financial planners in the past and what that will mean if people take that up as finance brokers. So there's a lot that a finance broker will get if they take a few leads from what has happened in the financial planning industry. So I'm looking forward to having Shane from the Hopkins Group down in Melbourne join us for that as well. Thanks everyone for your time, really appreciate it, and look forward to seeing a few of you this afternoon. Don't forget the keynote with Craig Johnson tomorrow, should be a cracker. Thanks again for your time, really appreciate it.
Again, thank you for having me. If anybody has any questions or queries, Chris has got all my details. Just reach out. Happy to have a conversation and send you through our quarterly reports. We'll keep you updated with everything that we find is going in the market.
Thank you, gents. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks, everybody.
See ya.
Take care. Bye-bye.